Okay, hi everybody, welcome back. We are here with a new session of Novel Bootcamp. This has got to be our third Novel Bootcamp that we've done. Though we've done many other sort of bootcamp writing classes for a brand new feature, brand new TV pilot. This is our marathon class. This is 90 days because it takes the longest to write a book of any type of written media that I'm aware of. If you just look at the basics of how much entertainment you're creating, it makes sense considering a movie is about 90 minutes to 2 hours of entertainment. Pilot is like 30 minutes or 60 minutes of entertainment, and a book is potentially, even on the shorter end, maybe 20 hours, and on the higher end, 50, 60 hours of entertainment. So it is so much more that we can get out of books. Like we spend so much longer with books that we have to kind of put more work into the creation, or to put longer into the creation of the book, considering you are almost certainly the only person involved in its creation. While movies and TV and things like this are intensely collaborative mediums, novels are probably the least collaborative medium besides, I would say, like web comics or something like that, or stand-up comedy or things like this. So you are not really relying on other people as much. This is all you. You are every department. You are the cinematographer, director, actor. You are everything. So it takes a long time, and it's a very complex and difficult process. Many have attempted, and many have, fallen on the battlefield or things like this. But regardless of that, we hope that you are here to really learn this very organized method of going through writing a book. We're approaching this as architects and as planners who are going to assemble the steps of the journey before you set out on that journey. And you're going to try to figure out, what's happening in every chapter. We're going to have a strong focus on outlining and 3-act structure and things like this for our books. So we're in a staged channel, meaning that you do have to request to speak. If you want to speak aloud, you can do that by clicking that white hand icon at the bottom of your Discord window. You then have to be accepted to the stage, at which point you'll have to click the Accept Invite button. So look for that at the top in the green bar. We are on WordCamp here, which is one of our many skill camp servers. We have free and low-cost classes to help you reach your life goals. These are our two main communities, ScriptCamp and WordCamp, which are focused on writing for the script and for the page. We have lots of free classes and table reads and script swaps and writers groups and things like this if you are interested in the community around writing. And then we also have some classes for our supporting members. That would be members that are paying for a subscription. So if you're interested in going beyond just the intro, the free intro class for any of these boot camps, then I would recommend signing up for Unlimited at scriptcamp.net. You can get yearly memberships and save 40%. And by signing up for Unlimited, you'll be getting access to every class, every workshop and group and event on every server. Not just ScriptCamp, but everything. So your ScriptCamp subscription includes WordCamp, FilmCamp, CodeCamp, TuneCamp for animation, graphic design, filmmaking, and many more, with a bunch of new classes coming out in the next month alone. We have a new class, brand new video editing class tomorrow, for example. So we're adding new stuff constantly with over 100 hours of live classes every month. You also get access to exclusive member channels, video library, which includes recordings of all the previous events, and huge discounts off of consultations and proofreads. So remember, by subscribing yearly, you do save 40% on that, and you get everything we offer on every server. So we hope that you sign up and stick around in our community, but if you're just tuning in to watch on one of our other streaming services like YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, you can come join us on Discord and interact more directly in the classes. You can click on the top right and you'll see that button that says Discord login, and you can get that link to join our Discord communities. And that's where we actually host the classes live. We also are live on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other places, and we can usually see those comments too, though it does sometimes take an extra minute or so for those to get through. Okay, so let's take just a really quick look. This is just me. I'm a screenwriter mostly. I've come from screenwriting and stage writing, and have not tragically had a novel published. But I'm currently working on my sixth my sixth attempt at moving into traditional publishing. So I've written quite a few novels at this point, and God knows how many failed, non-completed ones. I've been a repped screenwriter since 2017, and since then have been doing a lot of things like rewrites and polishes on horror thriller type movies. And I teach the boot camps and weekly writers lab on ScriptCamp. We have script swaps multiple times a week if you want to get feedback on your manuscripts. You can get critiques on your TV feature, pilot, or short with fellow writers twice a week, Tuesday 5 p.m. and Friday 11 a.m. Writer's Voice is going to be readings of prose, so that would be for this class if you are wanting to hear your work read aloud and get feedback on it week by week, then Writer's Voice twice a week, Saturdays. So tonight at 7 p.m. or we have one Thursday at 10 a.m. as well. And then we have table reads of scripts, so that would be features, pilots. Sunday at 2, that's tomorrow at 2. Tuesday 11 a.m. and Saturday 3 a.m., which is much more accessible worldwide. All these times otherwise are in Pacific time by default. We have upcoming new classes on CodeCamp, UI design and Discord bots, May 23rd and June 27th, 7 a.m. We have editing starting on April 28th. That's tomorrow at 5 p.m. on Film Camp. So if you're looking to learn how to edit videos on Premiere and Resolve. Novel Bootcamp starts today. We will be running for quite a while here on this same time slot, 12 to 2 Saturdays on WordCamp. We also have a couple advanced labs that you can apply to. We have a weekly Writers Lab, which is a place to bring your pages, questions, and topics that week and get feedback on up to 5 pages or 1,500 words of written work. And those are both Saturday today, 4 to 6 p.m., and also Friday, 12 to 2. So 2 Writers Labs a week for members. So plenty of stuff you get access to. All of this just for $19 a month if you're subscribing yearly for unlimited. And with new stuff all the time. Like our new session of TV Bootcamp, which starts tomorrow, 10 to noon on Sundays for the next 6 weeks. And that brand new video editing course on Film Camp too. Okay, so plenty of things coming out. We are working, for the most part, in this course on brand new novels. So just to kind of ignore the question behind me for a second, but let me just say, you will always have the opportunity to write a book and then in the next boot camp write a brand new one. That's kind of what the boot camps are for. They're for writing something new, then moving on to the next new thing and writing the next new thing. If you really, really want to bring a rewrite to one of these boot camps, you can. The challenges will be pretty different, and the instruction is not really geared towards rewrites. It's more towards something brand new, because there's just so many additional challenges you get when you're trying to address things like notes and rearranging existing plot threads and character beats and all these things like this. So you can definitely do a rewrite, but just make sure you're getting your feedback beforehand. So you need to be, you're not going to get a full read and full feedback as part of the course, because that would just be way too long for too many people and it would just not be possible. So for the most part, I'd say write something brand new. Start something new. If you're already tangled up in something you've been trying to figure out for a long time, it can be really difficult to untangle yourself from that. And it's almost always better to just go with something a little bit more disposable, not some passion project, but something that you can reasonably work through within the time frame and sort of teach yourself how to write a book. So before anything else, let's go ahead and make our sketchbooks. So if you've not already done this, this is going to be just a blank new Google document where you can keep and organize any and all ideas related to your book project, and notes for it, research any ideas or questions you have as you continue to develop it. So go ahead and make your blank new Google document and call it name of the book sketchbook. Or if you have no idea which book you want to write yet, you can just call it novel sketchbook and start writing down what the different ideas might be. But basically, you just want to keep everything more or less in one place. So let's go ahead and start that first. To begin with, I'm going to maybe give you an overview, then just maybe show you what the final sort of product that I'm instructing you to get to will look like. I mean, it's okay if yours doesn't look exactly like mine, because the outline is something for you to use, and it's something to help you and your collaborators if you have collaborators. But so ultimately, you're not going to get it checked. There's not a rubric that's going to get a grade and make sure that everything is in its right spot or that you're doing everything exactly by the book. You have to write your book however you can, and part of this is like learning how you write a book or teaching yourself how to write a book, kind of things like this. So to that end, you can't always expect your process to be the same as everyone else's, because everyone writes differently. But on that same note, we do in this course, and I have always in all of my classes, emphasize this really strictly structured, regimented, and organized approach that I think even if you don't end up using that exact thing later, then it's really helpful to have those skills and to be able to do those things and to potentially be able to, for instance, keep your collaborators on the same page as you continue to make changes in a really long and complex evolving story. So I recommend, even if you don't think you're going to use all of this exactly as I kind of think that people should, or instruct that you should, at least try it out, see what works and see what doesn't. I'm not going to hold your hand the whole way or get annoyed if you don't follow the exact structure, but all I can do is teach what I perceive to be the most efficient way of doing this. So here's the steps. 1, logline. We always start with logline, which is that one single sentence expression of what it is that you're trying to create. What is this story about? When blank inciting incident happens, a main character must do blank before blank, or else blank. Something like that. Not every single book ever written is going to fit really neatly into that very sort of Hollywood-style logline, especially because books don't really have to follow exactly the same kind of storytelling expectations and sensibilities that movies or TV shows do. You might see some very famous book that's kind of just like, I don't know, a married couple has a barbecue and stuff happens at that barbecue and they talk about and discuss stuff. That is much more sort of like workable as a novel concept or a play than it would be as a high concept movie or film, because think of a couple things. One, a book does not take millions of dollars to create. There's a much broader sort of genre of, or maybe much broader spectrum of different genres of books than there are of movies or TV shows, especially when you start to look at sub genres like, I don't know, psychological Bildungsroman, or you've got your picaresque, or like all these kind of old-fashioned, what are seen today as kind of dead or unusual genres are. There's always ways to make those work in books where there may not always be room for those in movies or TV. It doesn't take millions of dollars, so there's just more books that are made in more different niches. Books don't have to sell millions of tickets to be successful either. So by writing books that appeal to smaller demographics or have much more, less cinematic Hollywood-type stories, you are not necessarily doing the wrong thing. It's not like you can never have a career if all you write is picaresque Bildungsromans. But compared to if you're writing high-concept young adult thrillers, your chances of making a living as a novelist are much lower if you're writing only, backwards poetry or something like this, right? So you have more options as a novelist. You can sort of do a bit more of what you want. And you don't really have to justify your choices as much because it is a non-collaborative medium where you are the sole and definitive voice here. There's not a director who will come in later and become that sole definitive voice. So as somebody coming from screenwriting, it feels almost like incredibly overwhelmingly powerful as a novelist, because you suddenly don't have all these other voices and all these other cooks in the kitchen. You have at most your agent and the publisher and the whatever editor you get that you're working with for that publisher. So you have maybe 2 or 3, maybe a couple more voices depending on exactly how your structure works or how you're working your business. Maybe if you start an LLC and have different members of your author company, you have a few more voices to answer to or something like that. But in general, you have far fewer voices to answer to, and this is all, the spotlight is just on you and you alone. So we're going to start with logline, which is that simple one sentence, regardless of whether or not your book fits into a Hollywood type structure or not. It's helpful to have that sense of what character is this about and what are they trying to do. Especially because in this course we're focusing mostly on writing commercial fiction. This is not really about writing literary fiction or poetry, which have even fewer of the sort of guidelines or rules, because literary fiction and poetry are sort of about deliberately pushing the boundaries of those rules and sort of teaching us new things that we can do with language, or experimenting with language, or you have ideas of how you want to change language or show, like what cool tricks that you can do with it, or things like that, what cool tricks you can do with style, with structure, or with any of those other like form. Which with commercial fiction is not really the goal. With commercial fiction, we're trying to write something that is mass market. It has high appeal. Pretty much anyone could pick up the story and understand it, even if they wouldn't necessarily be in the target audience. They would at least get what's going on and why. And they do behave a little bit more like, well, we can say movies and TV are just the most popular forms of and video games are like the most popular forms of mass market entertainment. Books in the commercial space are trying to accomplish a similar thing. Be as entertaining as possible to as many people as possible of our target audience. So you do have to kind of know who your target audience actually is. So a logline will help you assess your simple goals for the project and help you kind of keep the story in your head. So although it might feel limiting or like maybe it's not exactly part of every novelist's process to do that one sentence logline first, I still think it's useful, and I will still advocate for that as the guiding principle that will help you reach the eventual destination. The sketchbook is going to be a simple, unsorted, unfiltered document of all your ideas, inspiration, influences, research materials. You can start working on your story beats in there. You can start working on scene cards in there. You can write whatever you want in a sketchbook. There's no real rules as to what to include, but you just want to keep everything more or less collected and in one place and organized. Story beats, that's going to be the basic plot moments in the general shape and the order that they need to happen in. You don't have to include every page number or like specific chapters yet. You don't have to include any lines of dialogue or any actual, scenes being written out, but we're just trying to figure out what the scenes will be. And then scene cards, you're going to get even more specific and break down not only what the chapters will be, but what the scenes within those chapters will be. And you're going to estimate out where those things are going to fall in terms of your page count, word count. Because in novels, if you're coming from scripts, in movies and TV, you're probably very used to dealing in page counts. But in novels, you have to consider that with different typesetting, different spacing, different font, different lettering, different serifs or whatever, any number of words could fit any number of pages. So number of words is our best benchmark when estimating things like how much story space is something taking up, as opposed to page numbers in books. So you have to start thinking in numbers of words, not pages. Pages means nothing when it comes to books. It's all words. So consider that an average length adult book is about 100,000 words. So it's like 80 to 100,000 words is like your average adult book nowadays. And then scene cards, once you're finished with those, you will go to pages, which is more of a screenwriting industry term, but that means we go from pre-writing and outlining into actually writing out the scenes, the dialogue, and everything else. Okay, so that's just a big overview of all the major steps here. I see a question in the chat. Should each chapter have a single sentence description for the things that happen? I don't normally think of it doing a logline for each chapter, but that's kind of cool. I like that idea. You could totally do that. So yeah, if that's helpful for you. I normally write titles on the chapters, which you might think of as having a similar sort of purpose, which is clarifying the point of that chapter. You don't have to do that if you absolutely hate that idea, but I just find that to be something that accomplishes that goal as well. Okay, so there's the major steps: logline, sketchbook, story beats, scene cards. Then we go to pages. I think just for the purposes of demonstration, I will show my most recent set of story beats, because I'm doing the same thing you guys are. I'm starting a book. I'm like a week or two ahead of you. But so I will just show off what the kind of scene cards outline that I'm working towards, and then I recommend everyone work towards something of this level of depth and detail in the time that you have. So we start with just the very basics at the top, but this is the scene cards, by the way. Final draft of the scene cards. So we start with the title, we have the genre, historical dark fantasy, and then we have the word count that I'm going for. You can include a picture if you want to, but I just use that to sort of help keep myself on track. We have the comps underneath. Comps are going to be the things that you're comparing the story to other books, ideally, but one of them could be something that's not a book. One of them could be a movie or a video game or something else. You can see here my upcoming book is called Bookbinder, historical dark fantasy, and the comps are Oppenheimer meets Call of Cthulhu, which I know is not a full-length novel. It's actually a short story, but people are familiar enough with it, I think, just from coming from, the great canon of Lovecraft, that I felt like I didn't need to use a novel for that. But I might actually change it to A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Anyway, so yeah, that's just the very basics at the top. That's something that you can include in your sketchbook as well. And a lot of this is stuff that you work out in the sketchbook, and when it's ready for the outline, then you copy and paste it over. So we'll look at the logline. When a disgraced Austrian professor discovers that a sorceress cult is taking over the fragile governments of post-World War I Europe, he must create a cult of his own and ally with a dark eldritch god to stop them. I also include a couple little details, like this is in theory part of a trilogy, so if I were to write the whole trilogy, these would be the names of the other ones. And then I've broken out the tense and point of view structure at the very top here, including color coding for the different characters' names. We then go into scene cards. Some of these are green. That means I've actually just already finished those scenes, so I'm going to scroll down a little farther just to show you that they've been broken up into chapters. So we have chapter, we have a title for the chapter, and then we have the word count, and then the point of view that that chapter is going to take. And we do that not only, we're figuring out not only the word counts and things like this, but it's helpful to be adding these to the document outline that includes your story beats as well. So you can see over here we have the story beat intro and all the chapters that take place within that beat, that sequence. And we have catalyst, chapter 6. We move right into trying the locks up until we hit break into 2. Then I've also divided the book into 4 parts of equal length, so 20,000 word parts. that are sort of superimposed on top of the structure as well. So we have part 1, 20,000 words, that leads us into the end of Act 1. Part 2, that starts with premise scenes all the way up until midpoint. So that's going to be the longest sequence, the premise scenes, of course. Premise scenes are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 chapters right there in the middle, leading us up to the midpoint, which is the end of part 2. We then continue into part 3, which starts with escalation and takes us up into the pit of despair. And part 4 starts us off with the break into 3. We go through finale, epilogue, up to chapter 33, with ending at about 80 to 85,000 words. So, this is really useful to keep this kind of document outline as a table of contents that you can use as you are filling out the rest of the outline. So if you want to know how to use that, use the headings on Google Docs. So you can see the heading 1 right there. So highlight any text. You can go heading 1, heading 2, or heading 3, which will nest it appropriately on the left-hand side under the document outline. And you can click the little X next to any of these if you want to remove them from the document outline, but otherwise it makes it just super simple to click around, see the whole thing, and have a complete sense of what the roadmap for the story looks like. And then when you start working through it, that's when I start doing the greens and the yellows and the reds and things like this. So we're moving from from color coding just due to the character POV into color coding due to completeness, or how much you've actually finished. So yellow means I'm working on it. You can tell I've only written the first 2 chapters of this book so far. And then green means that it's done and that it is as it should be. And red would mean that you were going to cut it. So that's how I kind of mark up the document outline as I work through it, or mark up the scene cards as I use them as a guide for writing the whole story. So this whole document is about 16 pages long. So I recommend spending the time doing a couple drafts of this before you even start pages on your book at all. And you are going to try to do as much of this as you can within the time that we have. It's okay if you can't finish the entire thing, or if you are not totally 100% clear on some specific part before you move ahead, or something like that. But my recommendation is that you try to build a process that looks something like this. It doesn't have to be exactly like this, but something like that. Okay, I will take any questions so far in just the overview and the kind of basics of what we are creating, and I'll check the chat as well for any questions that I've missed. We have a question: do we post loglines today, and if so, where? Yeah, we'll have a chance to share loglines today if you want to. I wasn't expecting many people would have it ready to go because this is the very first week of outlining. But if you have one, then yeah, you can totally share it for feedback today. There's a question: how do you create a logline? Sure, we will be covering that in today's slideshow. But I can give you the basics. It's going to look like usually something like: when inciting incidents, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. So there's just a preview for you. Let me finish taking questions, though, before we move ahead into loglines. Any other questions just based on the overview? Okay, I don't see any more for the moment, so I will move on. So you've already started your sketchbook, so that's that blank Google document where you're keeping all of your ideas, influences, and inspiration. The next goal is to, well, I guess we could talk loglines, or maybe it would be a little easier to, yeah, I think I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself. Before we dive too much into the mechanics of loglines, I'll give you just the basic template for it if you think you have a sense of what yours would be. But we'll probably want to start with things like, what genre do you want to write? And just like how to pick your idea a little bit before we get into specifically how to execute that idea. So let me just write down that template. If you want to start figuring that out for your book, you totally can. But before we focus on that too much, it's probably so early that maybe you don't even have your whole idea ready to go yet. You're not sure what you want to write yet. People come at this from all different sort of perspectives. Some have one book that they know for sure they want to write. Some are just like, I want to write a book, but I don't know what. Some people say, I know I want to write a sci-fi book, but I don't know what. Maybe it would actually be a little easier if we paused for the moment to ask anyone who would like to raise a hand and tell us what it is that you're trying to make. What are your favorite books and authors or genres? Or maybe you're coming in with a really clear idea. Maybe you don't have any idea. Feel free to just tell us about yourself and what you're trying to do or learn. Go ahead, Dakota.
Hello, everybody. Hope everybody is having a good day today. So, my goal is to write a mystery, specifically murder mystery. I love Agatha Christie, and this early, mid-century kind of novel, where it's very detailed. I come in terms of the books that I like to read. A lot of it is classic literature. So, Victorian, Bram Stoker, Victor Hugo, H.G. Wells, C.S. Lewis, a lot of what would be now considered archaic language. So I think it'd be fun to kind of write in that way. I'm very familiar with how to do that without being super purple, because that would be the danger of that is to be really purple with it. But considering that the goal is historical fiction, then it kind of would fit that a little bit better because it's that specific period. But I'm kind of open to whatever in terms of prose. I'm familiar with either or. It doesn't really matter. I'm not super set on that yet. But yeah, no, my goal is to do about 80,000 words right now, 80,000 to 90,000. I think that's realistic and doable. So, and that's kind of what the range is for mystery anyway. So, yeah, I think that's fine.
So just if some people find this to be a helpful reference, just because it's hard to imagine word counts sometimes. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone is about 83,000 words, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So if you imagine how long a read that is, that's on the shorter end of adult books, but in terms of young adult or middle grade, that would be kind of like at the middle to upper end. And
Yeah.
if you're writing for different age groups, obviously you choose different word counts, but 80,000 is a totally fine, totally achievable count to go for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because this would definitely be, I've written novella, so I'm trying to, up that a little bit more. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Let's keep going. Megan.
Unmute. Helps if I unmute. Okay, the project that I'm currently working on that needs to be outlined is a project in which a homeless artist sees who just got a new job, sees her colleague sacrificed, and she reports the murder, is chased by the cult, and when she turns up the next day, he is alive and at work. And so she teams up with a West African professor of ancient languages, and who's the only person who believes that she's seen this, and they have to uncover the cult before they can influence the next election.
Cool. Very cool. Supernatural thriller horror stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. All right.
So
Awesome. And so have you already started this book, or are you still outlining?
I've only written the first chapter, and it's not really the first chapter. It's more of a introduction / character study for the first character. So I haven't written the book yet. I've just written the one chapter, and I haven't written the outline yet. It's been percolating. I generally tend to write something about the main character first when I'm coming up with an idea. And then when I have an idea of the main protagonist, then I start working on the secondary protagonist, if there is one, which there usually is because I tend to write romances or things that have an undercurrent of romance. So this is a thriller with an undercurrent of romance, paranormal thriller with an undercurrent of romance.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right.
Or psychological thriller, if you like, as well, because of the aspect of the guy turning up the next day still alive, and she's like, I know I saw this guy murdered.
Right. Am I crazy, or is it magic? Turns out it's demons.
Yes, exactly. This is the one we were discussing the other day, exactly.
It's always demons with you, huh? Always demons all the way down.
It's yeah, man, like turtles all the way down.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, did you have a title, by the way?
Working title: Winter in America.
Winter in America. Got it. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you, Megan. Let's hear from someone else. Let's see. Have I missed any hands yet? There's a hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it.
All right, good, good. I fixed my mic. Right now working on a project, and dumping, rewriting, trying to stop that process. But a 30-year-old guy who witnessed his mother being eaten by a monster, but apparently there's more to that than there is. Psychological thriller with pros of H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe, so 1800s, 1900s Gothic literature. Plan on getting about 80 to 100,000 words. That's basically all I got right now. Favorite books, favorite authors, obviously H.P. Lovecraft, Allan Poe, Thomas Harris, who wrote the Hannibal Lecter series. Yeah, basically it.
Awesome. I'm a big fan of these as
And
well. Have you read any Laird
I've
Barron?
read. I'm sorry?
Have you read the author named Laird Barron?
No.
Check him out. He's like a sort of contemporary of that sort of gothic, cosmic, eldritch style, with some really strong literary prose. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Luke, go ahead.
Hello. So I have a couple of book projects. Um, hi, I'm Luke. I host the Sci-Fi Writers Group. I do a bunch of level design and stuff and art. And books that I like are mainly sci-fi. I've read just tons and tons of sci-fi as a kid. Um, Notable authors would be Arthur C. Clarke, who I really like his alien stuff, but I kind of dislike his human stuff. That's a common sci-fi problem. Isaac Asimov, great writer, great stories. Philip K. Dick, Ray Bradbury is just his prose is just amazing.
Hell yeah.
Big shout out to Ray Bradbury.
Yeah, he's one of my
And
favorites.
my favorite book of all time is hands down Restaurant at the End of the Universe. It is, it's the standout book in my favorite sci-fi series, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, is that the second or
So-
third Hitchhiker's book?
The second book.
Second.
Yeah.
I actually loved the first one as a kid, but never knew there were sequels, so I never read any of the sequels.
And a book project that I'm working on that I haven't shared much is called Fool. It's a father-daughter road trip journey, sort of contemporary, I guess, dramedy, if I had to put a genre on it. And the plot structure, like each chapter is based around one of the major arcana of the tarot, weirdly, because his daughter is like a goth tarot person. So it's an interesting project. I haven't worked on it in a long time, but it's one of the ones on the back burner. And I also have my Weird West novel that I'm sure everyone in here has heard about. It's a classic tale of a boy who wants to murder a corrupt sheriff who murdered his parents. Timeless tale.
Awesome. Except in this world, there's people made of bees and stuff like that, right?
So and dinosaurs and magic and shape-shifting, yeah.
Tale as old as time.
Tale as old as time. A man made of bees, an old witch.
Boy meets girl, guy made of bees meets witch, etc.
Etc.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Anyone I've missed? Looks like I see a log line. Anyone else who wants to introduce themselves and tell us what they're trying to write or anything else about? Go ahead.
Hey, how are y'all? I hope you're all are having a great day. Okay, so I've been working on my romance novel for like ever. Sorry, and I couldn't get the PDF to work. So it's the title Hearts on Fire. When an inexperienced codependent college musician starts dating her dream man, a reformed bad boy rock star, she struggles to keep her life together as overnight fame and illness threaten to tear it apart and hurts her life. And you were the one who really helped me do that because my log line was just like had way too much in it. Anyway, and the genre's romance. The comps are I read a rock star romance book, or I listened to it on Spotify. And so I listened to about three. Then there's another one that's based on Taylor Swift, and I listened to that one. It was pretty good. It mirrored her life and Hathaway movies. Okay.
I just was thinking, if you're looking for one more comp, there was a recent Anne Hathaway movie that I believe is sort of a like rock star romance type of thing. You might think about using. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Okay, I love Anne Hathaway. When people like badmouth her, I just feel like, what is your problem? Anyway,
I think it's this one. I think it's the one called The Idea of You.
okay, I'll see if it's on any of my streaming platforms. Anyway, single mom, express romance of 24-year-old. Oh my God, that's a serious age gap.
He's a boy band in that one, so maybe a little different than a rock. I kind of thought he was a rock star, but anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
similar type of
in
story.
the three, he's the he and his band are the Taylor Swift of his genre. So they've brought back, like hard rock, heavy metal, and some pop, So I mean, Kiss did a ballad.
Right, anything's possible.
Right. So anyway, so they start dating, and well, it goes along the log line. Why is it always boy bands? I don't know. I never got into the boy band. I mean, I did like I think it was In Sync, but I was too old to go all over them. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. The problem I've just been having is that it's incredibly long. I'm over 100K, and I'm only like maybe a quarter of the way through. So I have no idea how long it's going to be. I'm just writing it and then I'm going to edit it down.
Okay.
So
yeah, if you're only a quarter of the way through at 100,000 words, that sort of suggests the whole thing would be 400,000 words, which would be...
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I'm thinking great. It needs to be like 3 or 4 books, but I mean, I wrote half of the prequel like 5 years ago, and I honestly thought it was my best writing. So anyway, but so yeah, there it is. I don't know what else to say.
My recommendation for you would be write a new book for the bootcamp. You don't have to, but I'm going to suggest strongly that you've been kind of like on this one for a while, and maybe you hit a point where are you a little bit stuck, would you say?
I am stuck. It's mostly personal issues going on, but maybe I could go over to the sci-fi novel I'm writing.
That would be fine, yeah. And yeah, especially if there's something personal getting in the way, then I think that it's already so hard to write a book in this time frame, and the more problems you add on top of that, it gets even harder. And so I would try to maybe pick something new or fresher that like the sci-fi book, or something brand new, even newer than that if you want to. And just because your goal until you finish a couple books is just learn how to write a book. It doesn't really matter if it's perfect. It doesn't matter if it's good. You have to just be finishing books and moving on to the next one, or else you're missing that kind of really important last step. And you just will not be improving as much as you need to unless you're finishing it. You can do your best. You can do a few rewrites of it if you want, but if you're spending like more than a year on any one book, then it's gonna start getting in your way after a certain point. So you don't have to do this, but my suggestion for you is find a new fun idea that will like free you from the thing that you're stuck on.
Oh, okay. Or I mean, I really loved writing the prequel, and what made me stop was that I'd begun, watching a lot of videos and reading about publishers and agents, and they were saying, um, if you if you write a prequel first, your main character, you probably won't get another book, and your main character isn't going to be there. So, and I feel like my main character is the Shelley character, and the rock star. I mean, he's obviously important, but I don't know, maybe I should make him the main character. And if that's the case, then I feel like I'm not stuck, you know, but I don't really know how to make him the main character if I just go and, unless I just go finish the prequel first. Anyway.
Well, it's up to you how you can figure this out. I'm sure you can do some thinking and try to like figure out what you're most excited about. But as long as you are writing something and finishing it, then you're doing fine. If you're not writing and finishing things, then something is wrong. And I would look at maybe it's just you're too tangled up in the story. You can't see the forest for the trees, and it would just be a little simpler, and you'd learn more from just something a fresh start, something clean and new. Something you do have the opportunity to do as a novelist, though, is if you want to write a series, but you're not sure if you can sell the first book or something like that, you can write a series with multiple different entry points. Therefore, they all like take place in the same town or something like that. But you don't have to have read everyone in order to understand the next one. In romance, I don't really read romance, but I understand that they will do this thing where you'll have the same group of characters, the same setting, but each book will follow different romances between different pairings of characters within that same world. It doesn't always have to be the same people every time, because then if it was, it would be them getting together, then breaking up, then getting together, then breaking up again. But it's more like find a different romance in the same setting or within the same group of folks that you can center a story around. It's possible to do that. So, but you'll just have to figure out what interests you the most.
Okay, well, to answer the question, favorite books, I don't know what my favorite book is, but well, I mean, I used to read a lot of Star Trek, and so I like a lot of those books. But then I like some of the classics. What authors and genres I like a lot. I have mostly read sci-fi, but I also have read, at least a few romance novels. And say, what have I written before? It was, the prequel, and I have written a lot of lyrics. My goal is as a writer to get this book written.
That's always the goal. Get this book written. I like that. That's simple.
Okay, thanks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Michelle. So, if anyone else wants to tell us who you are, what you're trying to write, what you are trying to like learn or something like that, we're glad to hear it. Oh wait, I see one more from Mario. Mario.
Yeah, hi. I write coming of age fantasy novels. Just trying to see how other people outline. So my log line or through line or SPOC, whatever it is, after a string of murders, the town mayor drowns Mika, a 10-year-old boy, because he is on the spectrum and has insulted everyone in the village. Only he doesn't die. A water demon saves him. He leaves and learns to act normal with the help of his army friends. After training, he returns for revenge, but can he complete his revenge when he finds out that the mayor is the one true descendant alive capable of saving the world, or receiving the light and the best chance his army buddies have of surviving the upcoming demon war? Something like that.
All right.
So basically, the mayor is the chosen one.
Okay. So that sounded like a whole paragraph. And that was like 5 sentences or so. So a log line should be just one single sentence. That's the hard part. You do have to kind of boil that down into.
It is one sentence. It's one sentence. I just separated it into periods so that it'd be easier to read. It's one carry-on sentence.
Right. That's a problem. It's a run-on.
It's basically it's a run-on. It's a run-on sentence with the main enemy, the inciting incident, conflict, and the stakes.
But I couldn't understand any of it because it was too long. Like there's too much information in it, and it's too hard to keep track of. So I think you should.
So basically, after Mika is drowned by the town mayor, he vows revenge, but can he do so when the mayor is the chosen one?
Wait, who was drowned?
The main character.
The main
Mika.
character is dead. So is the main character a ghost?
That's why it's a longer thing. He survives. He survives.
He survives being. So they
He
attempt to kill
survives
him.
being drowned. He survives being drowned.
How do you survive being drowned? You're saying they.
That's too much of a. You know what I'm saying? Then I would have to go into the long line. You know what I'm saying?
No. So the thing is, you have to simplify. So when you would say something, the question would be something like, "Did they not successfully kill him, or is he an undead zombie ghost or something else?" So you have to then, in just a few words, tell us that. It's not easy to do. It takes a couple tries. Sometimes you might have to like write out a few different versions of
This is me. I just did it
it.
like 2 seconds ago, so it's fairly shaky. I'll try to simplify the log line a little bit, but
Okay, sure.
okay. So after being maligned, so the whole the inciting incident, like including inciting incident, is hard because then like okay. After being drowned, accused and drowned, no, after being accused of multiple homicides, a 10-year-old boy is drowned but survives. Is drowned by the mayor, but he survives and vows revenge against the mayor. But can he complete his revenge when he discovers that the mayor is the chosen one? Destined to save the world. There you go.
Maybe help a little bit, and you can start a little farther forward. So you can start with something like, when an innocent 10-year-old boy survives his unjust execution, he must blank and blank and blank, right? So you have to kind of condense and boil this down. You don't have to do it right away.
Well, I also add the antagonist into this log line.
Great.
Like I also add the antagonist into it. That's why it's a little bit longer than normal.
Okay, I got it. But so you don't have to do it live right now, but try to just get it down to like 30 to 35 words if you can. And the more information that you include, it becomes harder to track, even if it technically is one sentence. So like try to say it all in one breath, and if it takes more than one breath to say it, I usually use that as a pretty good metric for, this has gone on a little too long. Okay, so keep working at that. You can share the updated version in a little bit, and I'm glad to give you more feedback on it. Thanks, Mario. Okay, let's see. Was there another question that I didn't get to? Here's a question. Are loglines common for book concepts too? Yeah, loglines are essential for querying nowadays because almost every agent that you submit to has a form on their query tracker page that says insert logline here. So you need, yes, in order to even submit to an agent, you need to have a logline almost 100% of the time. Looks like we have a raised hand from Joel. Go ahead, Joel.
Hello there. Yeah, so, I mean, this is the first time for me, like, attempting a novel, which will be very interesting, because I have historically never been any good at prose. So, which is the whole reason why I went to screenwriting. But I thought I'd give it a go. Not really, yeah, I'll see what happens. I'm not sure yet if I want it to be a novel or a novella or, I think this has like potential to be a series. This is actually like the same story as my pilot or, the TV show that I want to write. And then, yeah, just seeing if it works better as a book, maybe. I need to figure out, like, other, in a pilot, you have an A story, you have a B story, and a C story. But a book, you can have more story arcs and stuff like that. Which is part of the reason why, because I wouldn't get everything that I want to say into a pilot. So yeah, that's why I want to try a book. So yeah, just kind of here to figure out what format my book should be, and I've got a full idea about like the voice to use. Like, I think one of the ideas I have is that the narrator is the protagonist from the future, and he's recounting the story. Maybe in like a diary format. He's like, you know, 5 years ago this happened or whatever. I don't know. Or maybe I'll just do it as a normal book. So I'm kind of like, I'm not sure which line I want to go down.
Okay, yeah, totally up to you. I mean, there are certain considerations. For instance, your age demographic. Is your book adult or young adult?
Great question. I think it'll be new adult, which I saw in your class that I was watching a few hours ago. You said that's not really a good market.
It's just a market not everybody agrees exists exactly. You can still write it, but most people would just call that adult nowadays.
Okay.
But it's up to you.
Yeah.
So if you're writing for more of an adult audience, then it would make more sense to have because you have adolescent characters, if I remember correctly. It would make more sense.
I think I've aged them up a bit because the kind of content that I was writing, it was a bit iffy having it happen to minors.
Oh, okay. So wait, they're no longer minors; they're adults now.
Yeah, they're adults.
Okay, in that case, then.
They're not 18.
Oh, not 18. Okay. So just the reason that I brought that up is because young adult books are written from a young adult perspective. So generally not from a flashback kind of looking back on my youth kind of perspective. They're written from a teenage perspective in the moment. So that's why you want to, if you are, this isn't just for Joel, but for everybody. If you're writing young adult, generally don't have your character be older and looking back on their youth. That kind of moves up the age demographic. Think of something like To Kill a Mockingbird, where the main character is like middle grade age, but it's an adult book because it's about her as an adult looking back on this sort of childhood experience with which kids have a lot of obvious trouble relating to that idea, right? So if you're writing for younger, your main character should be that age, and they should not age significantly up unless it's in the epilogue or something like that. If you're writing for adults, then they can be anywhere from 20 and up, though there is this sort of strange middle ground nebulous territory called new adult, which was kind of seeming like it was going to become its own market or its own serious like trend like 10 years ago, but a lot of publishers have just decided we don't really think it's a thing. So I do occasionally see agents that say they are looking for it, so it's helpful to know what new adult looks like and is like, and that's going to be a lot of things like college stories and like 21, 22, 23-year-olds like finding their place in the world. It basically is, people just say young adult but with more sex. It's like
sorry,
go ahead.
I should have clarified. So the early flashbacks, like the earliest flashbacks is from when they are about 18, and then they're telling the story from 5-6 years after that. So it would be like mid-20s.
Okay.
But the protagonist is. If that makes sense.
Makes sense, yeah. So that seems pretty firmly adult to me at this point. But it's up to you. I mean, especially it's kind of weird because like, is a 19-year or an 18-year-old that much more or that much less mature than a 20-year-old? There's not really that much of a difference, but this is all just marketing and like these are just this doesn't affect the writing of your story that much. In terms of the voice and the style to use, that it's entirely up to you. There's lots of options. There's diary, epistolary, which is where it'll be multiple characters writing back and forth between themselves, like Dracula is a famous epistolary novel. Frankenstein also epistolary. But you'll have to figure out just which point of views do you want to use, like how many point of views do you want, and how do you want to manage that spread of perspective. So if you have one sort of central main character, or maybe you want to give your story the ability to go and show what the villain is doing, that's like a very different style and requires you to sort of split up those points of view. And also, usually in your outline and color code them like I had shown in my outline here. So that's where it becomes very helpful to be color coding the different passages so you can tell, oh, I have too much of this character but not enough of that character. So my recommendation for you would be to write the thing that you enjoy reading the most. So if you've read a bunch of sort of epistolary diary memoir type books before, that would be a great idea. If you are mostly reading novellas or you love reading novellas, then write the first one as a novella. If you're mostly reading full-length adult novels, I would write it as a full-length adult novel. So just follow your own interests there, I would say.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for telling us about your project. I see Luke has a comment. There's some cyberpunk novel that's told through text messages. Yeah, we've seen lots of interesting modern sort of epistolary type structures, such as emails, text messages, reports, like official government documents and reports and things like that. You can do epistolary in lots of different ways, even if it isn't literally letters, because that does come from the Latin epistola, which means letters. It does not necessarily have to be linked to actual, handwritten letters at this point. You can make anything you want epistolary. Okay, we have another raised hand from Charlie. Go ahead.
Hi. So yeah, I decided I was going to attempt to do a short story within an alternative historical world that I've built out essentially as a background, just as an exercise to flesh out my characters a little bit more. Yes, at this point, that is the intention. Yeah. Go ahead.
Carried away, and end up adding more and more and more until now it's a novel series. Cool. Thank you for that. Any favorite books or authors?
All my book references are pretty outdated. Like, I'm a classical fantasy and sci-fi fan. Some of my favorites are like Stephen Baxter, Mark Richards, Robert Reed, like Bruce Sterling, stuff like that. Of course, I like Heinlein because he was like one of the first sci-fi novelists I ever read as a kid. Mm. And so, yeah, I like old school stuff like that. I have a queue of contemporary writers that I have not gotten around to yet, so I'll reserve any type of judgment or like faux knowledge on contemporary writing. Okay. But the short story that I want to write, I think I'm going to call it Alterius, which is a play on the script that I wrote, Alterity. It's taking one of the secondary characters and kind of following them. So it's in like the crime mystery genre. And a current iteration of a logline that I have is that after spending one last summer abroad in France, an apathetic English aristocrat disappears, prompting a desperate search by her family and friends to uncover her whereabouts and unravel her secrets.
Okay. And what time period is that?
So it's present day. It's just an alternative historical timeline. So it's, I guess you could say, like a parallel universe where like historical events just happen in a different sequence. So we're in present day. It just doesn't look exactly like our present day.
I see. Okay, yeah. Something about the word aristocrat just makes it feel like you're setting this in like the Victorian era for some reason. Though I guess there are definitely people we would still define as aristocrats nowadays. Thank you for that. And it seems like you have a nice achievable goal. Like a short story is usually going to be around 7,500 words at the max. So with 90 days to go, if you just write, 100 words a day, you'll definitely get there.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah. Thanks for the updates. Let's continue on and let's talk about things like, before we get more into loglines and before we give more feedback on loglines, let's talk about just some of these basics of thinking in words and picking our genre and subject matter and things like this. So here's the basics. Short story is going to be 1 to 10,000 words. Some people say 7,500 is going to be the max, but I think they can go up to 10K. There's not really a hard limit on them, but around 10,000. Novelette is going to be like 10 to 20,000 words. Not that many people read these or know about these, but these are, and because you don't really see these in bookstores or things like that, these are mostly published in ebook and audio format. But I love novelettes. They're so cool. To read a complete and satisfying story in its entirety, just like on your lunch break or something, is so incredible. I really recommend Tor.com, which has a lot of really great ones. You can look at the anthologies of best sci-fi horror of the year from Tor.com, which I believe are mostly abridged or are collected by Ellen Datlow, who's one of the best sort of sci-fi fantasy horror kind of like short story collectors, and they're fantastic every year. My favorites are going to be Garth Nix's Tor.com novelettes, like The Necessary Arthur and Dislocation Space. And then there's some really great sort of horror ones as well. But yeah, check out Tor.com if you're looking for novelettes to read. They have free ones all the time. Novellas 20 to 40,000 words, and you sometimes see these in stores, but mostly only if they are from very big famous authors. Like some are even relatively famous stories in their own right. Things like some famous sci-fi like I Am Legend, or things like The Mist by Stephen King, novellas that also have, are found in bookstores. A lot of modern authors nowadays, if they publish novellas or novelettes as well, it might be in hybrid style, meaning like just online or just audio. The reason for that is because printing is expensive, and you can't charge like the thing is, going to the bookstore recently, I wanted to get some really, really, really short little books, and I wanted to get some really thick ones, and the annoying thing was that they were the same price, right? You can't charge 10 times more for a book that is 10 times longer. So even those little tiny hardbacks of like poetry and horror short stories and things like this from Barnes & Noble were about $18 to $20. And so were the big, thick door stopper books. Those were about $20 as well. So it's not really incentivized, unless it's from a big name author, for publishers to pay for, especially hardback, of novelettes or novellas. Typically they're only going to be, able to make their money back easier if they're doing full-length fiction. So novels are about 40 to maybe, 300,000 or 400,000 words is when the binding of the book starts to actually or this text is getting so small and the binding is getting so strained that it becomes difficult to actually carry those things around. Like maybe 400,000 or 500,000 words is kind of where we would max out a lot of modern novels. The longest work of fiction in the English language of all time is a Super Smash Brothers fan fiction on fanfiction.net that's called Subspace Emissary, I believe. You should look that up to confirm the title, but I just want to point that out as a work that is several million words long. But we are not writing Subspace Emissary. We are writing commercial novels for mass market. So that's going to, for the purposes of this course, I recommend maybe 70 to 90,000 words as a target, especially if you're writing an adult or YA. If you're writing middle grade, you can easily get away with 40 to 60, and if you're writing picture or chapter book, you can get away with even shorter than that. I'm not an expert in writing for younger demographics. There are a couple other members of the server that know more about that than me. Series can be an unlimited number, potentially. Many max out around 10 books, though you don't have to. There's many that go over that too. Novel series are much more common than novelette or novella series, though there are examples of both. We see sometimes in sci-fi, especially, novella series catch on, like the Murderbot series by Martha Wells is a series of novellas that have done quite well and are very popular. So a page using 12-point font, it's about 500 words. In a published book, it's maybe 250 words. When writing a novel for the bootcamp, you'll be writing, when you get to the actual pages, you'll be writing about 2,000 words a day, with the goal of writing, something between 50 to 90,000 words, meaning that if you have a shorter target word count, then you'll be writing less than 2,000 a day. And if you're writing something that's longer than this word count, then you'll be writing probably more than 2,000 words a day. But personally, I write just on weekdays because I teach classes all weekends. And so I'm writing 10,000 words a week. You don't have to set your number exactly there. You can set it wherever is most comfortable for you. But at about 10,000 words a week, you're getting through a book in a couple months. So yeah, remember, movies and TV and plays are meant to be consumed in one sitting. Books are not supposed to be generally consumed in one sitting. They will take 10 to 25 hours to read on the shorter end. Chapters are a nice way to break up that novel and create that effective overall structure, and are a great way to just give that reader a natural break. You do not have to include chapters. We're not going to go too much into chapters just at the moment. Let's go look at more at sort of target markets and how this determines the basic choices that we make for a book. So target market is our way of saying this is the age group that the book is intended to interest. It doesn't mean no one else can read it, but it means they're less likely to, as it sort of is determining where the book is being shelved, what art is on the cover, how the book is advertised, and things like that. We are going into this class with the expectation that you are trying to be a traditionally published author. So, and these are traditionally in traditional publishing, or trad publishing as we often call it. Then these are the major demographics. We have adult, which centers on characters 20 plus. We have new adult, which we mentioned as that kind of weird market in between protagonists, maybe 19 to 25, but like generally a lot of agents and publishers say they're not interested or don't recognize new adult. Children's is going to be either YA, so protagonist is a teenager and it's from their point of view, and middle grade is from maybe ages 9 to 13. We would want to handle darker subjects a little more delicately and just consider the sensibilities of the age group that we're writing for. Chapter books is maybe 5 to 8. Some subjects are just completely off the table, and picture books is maybe ages 1 to 5. I don't really have any advice for you here, though I will say they are harder than you might think. A lot of people are like, I can't really write a book, but I could write a picture book. It's harder than you think. So, any type of subject matter can be explored in books of different types of markets. I mean, I guess there are very strict considerations with some of these, right? You don't want to write something incredibly disturbing for younger audiences unless it's handled with a degree of care, but there are young adult books about the Holocaust, like The Book Thief, or adult books about people going on, puppy love first dates or things like that. And you should just kind of take into account what interests the target audience and skew the presentation of that story accordingly. Here's a question from Nacho, and we have one from Lasagna too. I'll take both of these. So Nacho says, do I think it's possible to write a sort of YA novel that appeals to YA fans, but with like a 60-year-old protagonist who thinks like a teenager or something? Maybe. It would be a tough sell. It might be a little easier if the protagonist was some sort of non-human entity, like, I don't know, a talking animal or a spirit or something like that kind of behaves like a teenager. We have, like, for instance, the Bartimaeus books, which are middle grade, and the main character, at least the narrator character, is an ageless demon, right? But he's kind of clever and quippy and funny, and so, like, yeah, for sure that can fit into a middle grade kind of sensibility. Also, there is a kid character that he basically teams up with, so it'd probably be helpful if you had younger characters in your story as well. But like an older human protagonist, it's going to be tricky to convince agents and publishers that would appeal to that age group. So it would be like threading a needle, but in theory it's possible. I'd like to see it. We have another question. Can I recommend sites and apps to write your novels? Google Docs and Word is fine, but I've been curious about others, especially story planning types, and if they're actually useful. That's a good question. I genuinely could not recommend anything besides I just write my novels in Google Docs. I hear a lot of good things. People really like Scrivener, so you could check that one out. And the other big one that people like is called Fountain. But I personally don't even mess with them. I'm fine with just a blank page on Google Docs. Keeps everything nice and centralized and in the same place, and I can access it from any device. You can write on it from any device. You can write on it with your voice. Like, it's just super easy. So personally, I haven't explored other options too much. But if anyone has suggestions or ideas, feel free to let us know in the chat. Here's a question. Can we try AI to work on a novel? Yeah, AI is useful for all kinds of things like organization, outlining, formatting, and stuff like that. It's not going to do a good job of writing pages for you, though. So yeah, at one point in this course, I do go into how to use AI and how to think of AI as part of your workflow as a writer, definitely. So we're writing commercial novels. I mostly write fantasy, horror, sci-fi, and historicals. Commercial fiction has broad appeal and the potential to sell a lot of copies. It's written in a way that is accessible and likely to be enjoyed by the average reader, meaning typically it will fall within storytelling styles that we've seen before. You're not inventing a new storytelling style or trying to push the boundaries when it comes to the basics of language. We often fit into clear-cut subgenres such as mystery, horror, romance, fantasy, science fiction, things like that. We are writing commercial fiction in this course. If you really want to write literary, you can, but I can't give you as much advice on it, and a lot of the time you have to kind of forge your own path when it comes to literary. You have to show us what's possible. Books in literary tend to be more sophisticated, in quotes. Their intention might be to advance the medium, or change the world, or change culture, or just stun readers with their amazing prose. Think of your Cormac McCarthy or your David Foster Wallace, where they are reveling in the language. So literary fiction is very much about the words themselves. You could write a literary... They're not really, they're not as motivated by things like exciting plots. You could have a literary fiction book that's nothing but... Like, some of the best Cormac McCarthy... Some, incredible Cormac McCarthy books are nothing but old guy goes fishing on his own and does some farming for a while. And it's about how that action kind of symbolizes the survival of all mankind or something like that. Very complex ideas and complex language in literary fiction. Michelle, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering exactly what is literary fiction, but you explained it. But I'm also thinking of like all of John Steinbeck and the Moby Dick, things like that. That is all literary fiction.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Well, yeah, so Moby Dick, definitely literary fiction, but you can say just because something's literary doesn't mean it can't also fit into certain other subgenres. For instance, we might
Mm-hmm.
say that Moby Dick is a literary nautical adventure story, right? It has
Mm-hmm.
elements of both. So, yeah, it's kind of just something doesn't have to be exclusively literary and nothing else at all. It can have
Mm-hmm.
shades of other things or elements of other stuff in it, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any literary romance? I mean, Emily Dickinson or Jane Austen, maybe?
Yeah, there's plenty of literary romance, even modern
Oh,
stuff, not just classics too. But I just don't really read romance, so I may not be the best one to recommend them to you. But
yeah.
yeah, let's ask in the chat. Anybody tell us about literary romance that you've seen or read recently that you really liked?
Um, well, I do have another question. I did come up with some concepts while you were talking, and it doesn't have to be in here, but sometime I'd like to maybe share them and get some feedback about which ones, if I'm going to write a new novel in 90 days, which ones would probably be best. You
Oh,
know,
we have lab today at 4 if you want to come by.
yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, so for anyone who's not a member, Michelle's a member. Lab, you can come every week, Friday, 12 to, these are all Pacific time, so 12 to 2 or 4 to 6 on Saturdays. And you can bring whatever questions you want and up to 5 pages of script or 1,500 words of prose for whatever feedback that you are looking for. So that's usually a great place to go get those, to get more one-on-one work done and get more sort of direct questions answered. Thanks, Michelle. So let's keep going with our slideshow. We're talking differences in target markets. So we have commercial, we have literary are the main ones. Commercial fiction you might think of as faster paced and more plot driven. Literary fiction we can think of as probably a little slower paced and more character driven, more driven by things like ideas and the sophistication of the language, advanced vocabulary, longer, more complex sentences, experimental styles and structures, and generally not so simple happy endings or things like that, right? These are stories that are challenging you and making you think. And then we have in the middle, which is what we call upmarket, which is going to include elements of both. Maybe it's a more commercial style plot, but with more literary type language. And that would be to me something like No Country for Old Men is kind of like where Cormac McCarthy goes a little bit from literary into more sort of upmarket. And it is a extremely literary book, but it's also an exciting revenge, like crime revenge type thriller plot. So you'll start to see crossovers here and there. There's not one strict definition of what upmarket is. And there's nothing necessarily pretentious about saying, I write upmarket or I write literary. You can definitely do that. The other thing is that literary or upmarket don't mean good, and commercial doesn't mean bad, and that you can have terribly written literary work, or you can have fantastically written commercial work. They are not judgment values, and they're not, it has nothing to do with the quality. Here's some examples. We can even see in the marketing what these different sort of voices might be like, or what the different sort of interests of the author might be like in choosing these different demographics. On the right, we have the commercial, which looks like a movie poster. These are westerns here. It looks like a movie poster. So we've got the main pictures of the main characters in the front doing some exciting, interesting thing. If it's fantasy, there's probably a girl with a sword on the front, and if it's romance, there's probably a shirtless guy in an exotic location on the front. Upmarket does not necessarily broadcast its thrills up front as much. This is an upmarket western by S. Craig Zoller. It might have a more commercial plot, which Congregation of Jackals does. It's kind of a defend the town western plot, and like most of his books, they have that's pretty simple structure to them. Wraiths of the Broken Land is kind of we need to go from here to there and rescue the girl and get back to the civilization kind of plot line. But it is written in this very advanced sort of amazing prose. And then last we have literary, which would be like The Assassination of Jesse James, which is a 700-page epic historical non-fiction inspired western. So it's like basically trying to tell the story of the last days of the James gang, but with some invented scenes and maybe invented characters and things like that, but in a voice that is much more concerned about ideas and legacy and heroism and the American soul than it is concerned about really exciting shootouts or chase scenes. So that's kind of the difference here. Like, you can decide whatever you want. You can pick any of these that you are that just fit your sensibilities more. You have to ask, what's more fun for me? Do I want to explore the human condition? Do I want to see a cool stagecoach robbery? Like, or do I want to do both? Here's some for fantasy as well. Luke says, fantasy romance covers I've seen are just a close-up of some fantasy object, like they're ashamed of the romance part. Well, they're not ashamed of it, but you might think of it as they're trying to broaden their appeal beyond just romance readers to some extent. I think you're talking about things like The Cruel Prince, which is just like the cover. It's like, yes, it is a fantasy romance, but the cover is just, yeah, some tree branches, right? I see what you mean. All of these. The Holly Black kind of thing. Doesn't exactly have a guy and a girl carrying cool swords and looking like they're in love on the front, does it? But you can see that as trying to branch out a little bit beyond its original target audience. You can see even people like Disney doing the same thing. There's a reason they didn't call Tangled Rapunzel and they didn't call Frozen the Ice Queen. They're trying to broaden the market beyond just girls 5 to 12 who they think would be interested in princess movies, for instance. So, genres. Some genres have stricter rules than others, and things that you absolutely have to have or things that you absolutely have to not have. There isn't always a definitive checklist unless you're writing romance, which does actually have a checklist to some extent. In terms of expectations, there's some combination of tropes and general indefinable vibes that the story is expected to sort of exude. You might think, who would the audience of this genre be, and what would they need to see in this work before they'd be satisfied? So we're not going to necessarily go through all the genres at the moment, but I'm going to give you the major ones. The major ones are going to be contemporary. This is your... Basically, in movies and TV, we call this comedy or drama. We have horror. And this can be everything from your slashers to your existential dread kind of stories about people going crazy, starting to hallucinate things that aren't there, or things like that. Or it might be, there's a killer with a shotgun. We have fantasy. Your quest fantasy, your epic fantasy, your small scale fantasy, your fantasy romance, or romantasy as people call it. We have romance, of course, which is the top selling genre of novel, and has always been, as far as I know. And romance being the top selling genre has the strictest rules I'm aware of, including central love story, emotionally satisfying and optimistic ending. That's from the Romance Writers Association. I did not make these rules up. You can be set in any place or time or have varying levels of, spiciness on the page, but it is imperative to have a central love story and an emotionally satisfying, optimistic ending where the couple ends up together. When you don't do those things anymore, you have left the world of traditional romance, and you are now writing something like romantic tragedy. We have mystery. I think this one has a lot of unwritten rules and expectations too. Maybe not there. I believe there is a Mystery Writers Association. It may not be as strict as saying the killer always needs to be caught and we always need to know exactly what happened and why. But if you don't do those things, you have to have a really good reason why you're not. We typically like one of the unwritten rules is that we like to learn the answers in the mystery. Maybe we have a question or a comment. I see a raised hand. Go ahead.
Thing about romance having an optimistic ending. What about Romeo and Juliet? That has one of the most tragic endings I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's why that's not what we would consider to be a romance novel. That's a romantic tragedy, and this was obviously created a long time before modern concepts of what a romance novel were kind of codified. It's a 500-year-old story, so rules do sort of change, or expectations change a lot over time. Nowadays, you would not sell Romeo and Juliet amongst all the other romance novels. We would see that in the drama section, and so yeah, you can definitely. There are very, very famous stories that end sadly, but we would not classify those as modern romance novels. Make sense? Okay. Question? Here's a comment from Dakota recommending Timothy Findley's work if you're looking for historical fiction that has fantastical elements. Thank you for that. Yep, and if anyone's curious for a genre that sort of, this is one of those things that mostly exists in prose and not really in movies and TV as much. Magical realism is a cool sort of in-between genre that we see, which combines elements of fantasy, contemporary, and sometimes things like satire. Looks like we have one more raised hand. Let's hear from JR.
I have a question.
Go for it.
What would you call like a fantasy like kind of like story, but it's all like set in like modern contemporary like life, where like the normal like world meets like the fantasy world?
That's
For
usually...
example, like
Go ahead.
someone with like magical like superhero powers is stuck in like a normal like world, and so like it's like this whole like if what
We usually call that urban fantasy.
urban fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Uh,
It has its own
I have,
tropes. Go
I
ahead.
have another quick question.
Mhm.
That's unrelated, but would you say that there could be like something when like it's like a drama story that's supposed to be very like sad and like very depressing in the start, but in the end it turns out to be very like hopeful, like optimistic? Is there a genre for that, or is that just what we like to call drama mostly?
So
Where
drama.
like everything is not.
Drama is
What?
not a term we use in books. Drama means, in the world of publishing, drama means plays. So that's the kind. It's kind of tricky to get used to if you're coming mostly from movies and TV, where drama is like absolutely a clear genre. In books, we don't really use it. So your question was: is there maybe like a subgenre for stories that start as a very sort of serious contemporary, and then they get happier and lighter over the course of the story? Or are you saying it just sort of has an optimistic ending?
Let me put it like this here. Let's say like your life is like completely like just down on your luck, like everything is going not your way, and it's just depressing. But then as things start to get like really good, and you start to like have like a better like life for you, I would say that's something like that, where like a story starts out where like we see like someone is like downtrodden or like alone or something, and in the end they like have gotten maybe married, gotten success in something, or proven themselves. Because I like that kind of story more, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
think
not a big
that's...
fan of like everything. It's good and nice in the start, and everything just goes depressing at the end.
So I don't think there's a specific genre that's attached with that idea of characters going from having a bad life to having a good life. I think we see examples of that in lots of things. That's kind of what we would consider to be the rags to riches type narrative or something like that, or just any story with a positive arc where your hero ends up with more than they had at the start. So no, I don't think that's particularly tied to any one genre, but I would say in terms of certain genres, they typically do avoid that type of ending. For instance, in horror, we usually don't like to have happy endings where things turn out better for the hero at the end. That would be the one big exception. But generally, no, I don't think that's exclusive to any one genre.
Okay, thank you. That was all I had to ask.
Great, thanks for the questions. Definitely immerse yourself in the genre that you are trying to write in. I just realized my mic was cut off for a second, so those watching the stream are very confused. I'm still here, don't worry. All right, we've got, I see one more question, raised hand from Michelle.
Hi. I'm just wondering what is magical realism? I'm thinking that it's magic in the real world that might be hidden, might be open, something like that, or am I wrong?
So magical realism is a very specific and unusual genre that not everyone has even read it before or seen it before, so it's hard to know unless you've read it. But it usually involves, they're usually going to be contemporary stories or historical, but they are going to have one or two magical, fantastical things happen in them that are treated very normally within that world, and that are not, there's not like a wizard that did it or something. It's just something impossible happens that everyone kind of accepts. And this can be used for all kinds of reasons. This could be used to like make some sort of broader point about society, or it could be used for a satire or something like that. This is a really strongly rooted in the kind of South American literary tradition as well. So a lot of the traditional kind of magical realism comes from Central and South America. So I would look into those if you're interested. But generally, so like I'll just give you an example. One of my favorite magical realism short stories is called Pop Art by Joe Hill. And the story is about a boy growing up in modern, I think, England. But his best friend is a balloon man. He's like an inflatable person made of balloons. And nobody thinks that's that weird. Nobody is like, why is there a guy made of balloons? They're just like, oh, yeah, that's his thing. He's made of balloons, right? So it's treated as kind of a natural... That's what the realism is coming from, that word realism. It means it's just treated as a realistic part of the world.
Oh, okay. So like maybe an angel or a demon, and everybody just like, yeah, that's an angel, or yeah, that's a demon. So, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry to ask so many questions. I just like, what that?
That's great. No, thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, check out Magical Realism. I can link that story if anybody's interested in reading about the inflatable boy one. Really, really, really well written story. So, thriller, similarities to horror, but it does not have to involve horror. And also, in some definitions, we say that in novels, horror is sort of a subgenre of thriller in a weird way. You have to think of thriller very differently from movies and books. In books, thriller can be, it also kind of encompasses what we think of as like action movies. We don't generally call them action books. So this would be, we would call those military thrillers, right? Or something along those lines. Or political thriller or things like that, or espionage thriller. That's typically what we consider to be the, quote, action movies of the book world. So thriller is going to be tense, exciting, high-stakes plots. It can include everything from Born Identity, like your spy stuff, or it could include things like psychological thriller, like The Girl on the Train. It's a much broader umbrella in books than it is in movies. Front Dakotas and a few other folks in the chat I see are giving us examples of thrillers, like military thrillers, like Dan Brown's. Yeah, Dan Brown are going to be kind of like mystery conspiracy thrillers. There's so many different types of thrillers in books. We have action adventure, which is usually going to fall under this category of thriller as well. But there are some occasional exceptions, like if you're writing sort of in the pulp tradition of adventure books or things like that, then yeah, those have their own tropes and expectations as well. Sci-fi can be very, very many different things, but it sort of tells us what the subject matter of the story is going to be. It tells us that it's going to involve speculative technologies that don't exist and may never exist, but like theoretically could exist or operate on real principles, or are going to envision speculative concepts that in theory, could happen in our world eventually. But that isn't to say nothing of the plot. You can do a sci-fi romance, sci-fi adventure, sci-fi action, sci-fi horror, whatever you want. So, this is kind of the main choices that we have. I see a question. This is a good question. What's the difference between fantasy and sci-fi? Could you add computers in fantasy and call it sci-fi? Pretty much, yeah. I mean, so there is that in-betweeny place which is called science fantasy. Things like Star Wars have elements of both, right? There is both magic, the Force, and there's also supercomputers and clone armies and things like that. So you don't have to actually make too clean of a distinction. You can always include elements of both, and fans of one are usually fans of the other. So you can mix and match them as you see fit. But the restrictions come in place after you've defined all the rules, really. So like after the first 50% of the book, of your sci-fi book, if then we learn that magic is real, then it's going to feel like a mistake, and like you've just way too late brought some fantastical element into what was otherwise a very rules-based world. Or if 90% of the way through your fantasy story, we learn that the dragons are all actually robots. That might kind of annoy the readers as well, unless that is like the whole point of the entire thing. So there's a lot of bleed over. There's a lot of things that cross over. Generally, fantasy involves things that are plot elements that are impossible currently and will always be impossible, whereas sci-fi involves things that could maybe one day be possible, even if realistically they won't happen like that, but they just hinge on real principles. That is just the main difference between fantasy and sci-fi. Does the speculative element in your story hinge and operate on real existing principles of any kind? If yes, then if it's something that would maybe one day be possible, it's probably sci-fi. If it's something that absolutely would never be possible, you have characters who they aren't flying spaceships, but they are people whose job it is to harvest the sky or something like that, right? That's a fantasy job, not a sci-fi job, so that would fall into that other category. Ultimately, you should read a lot of both and have a sense of what readers of both are looking for. Okay, so going into, we have half an hour left. I didn't really expect anyone to have log lines ready to look at today, but in about 10 minutes I'll ask if they do and offer to look at them and give that early feedback if you want. Or maybe I'll just sort of open it to, in about 10 minutes I'll just leave our last 15 to 20 just for kind of open questions, I think, and we'll see what we have to work on if anyone has log lines they want to look at or if they have something else they want to ask about. But let's just look at the... Oh, I'm not going to make you take us through the story, don't worry. So, just if you've never been an outliner before, you might just think of these very basics elements of structure before you get going, because even if you aren't going through planning your structure very carefully, your book still needs some kind of structure, and it's going to have one. It just may not be the structure you intended if you go into it without having any kind of clear plan or method of attack. So, think of the first 25% being your first act, your beginning. The middle being the middle 50%, and the end is another 25%. So the second act is significantly longer than the first and second. It's twice the length of either the first or the third act. So that's the first kind of key element of 3-act structure. We have the beginning, where your characters will be introduced to the reader. Their goals and obstacles will become clear. We're going to see maybe what they want or what they have been denied or what it is that they are looking for. What is the drive that's keeping them in motion? And a lot of the times nowadays, especially if you're writing in sci-fi fantasy for young adult or middle grade, then agents are looking for stories where we have very motivated, forceful protagonists that enter. I've even seen this on some agents' wish lists. They're looking for exclusively for stories where protagonists enter the story with a goal that they are strongly pursuing as of the very start. So meaning it doesn't take them a whole act or more than a whole act to even figure out what they want or what they're trying to do. So nowadays the trend is for more decision-driven characters that are moving the story forward in a very forceful, propulsive way. The middle is your characters trying their hardest to achieve their goal, relishing in the victories and battling obstacles and conflicts and having setbacks and losing progress at times. We have stakes and tensions high, but generally we are making steady progress towards the first major milestone of your character's goal, at which point, through being challenged, they are going to be forced to try new tactics, to change course, to try a new partnership or a new relationship, something like that, and they are going to have to leave their comfort zone and grow as a person. And then the end, your biggest crisis, the hardest obstacles and choices for your main character, that they are going to be forced to really dig down deep and become someone new in order to achieve their goal, succeed, win the dance battle or whatever it is they're trying to do. They might win, they might lose. It's entirely up to you. They don't have to succeed. It doesn't have to be a, quote, happy ending, but it should feel satisfying. That is what we are hoping for above all else, an ending that feels satisfying. But it's tough. It's tough to create a story that ends in a way that feels both inevitable yet also perfectly satisfying. Like unexpected but also inevitable. A story that's filled with surprise all throughout, but that we generally feel like we aren't being blindsided and we know the type of place it's going to. We're just kind of continually delighted at every turn. It's not easy to write, thousands and thousands of words that keep and grip an audience that has a million other things they could be reading, watching, or doing. So it's a long road. You decided to walk for yourself. This is just like the very essentials of the plotting that we're not going to go deeper into today, but that is just kind of like the basics of 3-act structure as we would understand a book. So if you're writing a 100,000 word book, first 25 makes it super easy, right? First 25,000 words are your first act. middle 50,000 are your second act, and final 25,000 are your final act. That would be a general shape of your story. Okay, so let's look at log lines. If anyone, I didn't expect anyone to have them, but it seemed like a few people did. So we're looking for, in terms of a high concept hook, you don't have to have a high concept hook. It helps, especially if you're writing in these very commercial spaces. Sense of irony, some new or different point of view, some variation or interesting mashup of familiar elements. All of this can kind of crystallize in a very clear and engaging hook for your story. We're looking for some element of the familiar mixed with something fresh and different and unique. The logline should clarify that the story has an audience, and it should feel like, you know, your character is uniquely suited for that journey, and if it is a stronger internal than external story, especially, that internal journey should be constantly mirrored and amplified and kind of exacerbated and pushed to its inevitable conclusion by that external journey. And your character is interesting. Your character changes in interesting ways through both of them, both the internal and the external. We aren't really looking necessarily for a series of recurring situations. That would be more like a TV show, though you can write a short story anthology or something like that if you want to, but it should just be clear what is the theme that links these together, or why, ultimately, is this a short story collection and not just a bunch of separately published stories. It's helpful if they have some unifying element that kind of binds them together. And for the purposes of the bootcamp, I recommend don't write a short story collection. It would be better to write a novella or novelette than a full-length short story collection. Okay, that's the essentials of loglines and what we're trying to do here. We are looking for stakes or conflict that are primal, life and death, friendship, revenge, sex, and love, things like this. And we generally like it to follow this kind of format in 30 to 35 words-ish. When or after inciting incident, that would be the event that kicks your story off, the first domino to fall that will knock over all the other dominoes eventually. An adjective protagonist tells us who is, if you have lots of plots, this is your A story protagonist, so you do have to frame this basically around one person. They must conflict, that's telling us what do they basically have to achieve or do in their external goal, before or in order to stakes or ticking clock. That might tell us the time frame of the story, the antagonist of the story, what happens if they fail. Not every single book that you can think of, like there's plenty of counterexamples I'm sure you will think of that don't necessarily fall into this. And if you can write a logline that covers the basis of your story without using this exact framing, then that's all right. But you should still have a one-sentence logline of about 30 to 40 words at the most. Okay, so I will open a blank doc and be glad to look at and give feedback on loglines or book concepts if you guys want to ask about them now, so feel free to raise a hand if you'd like to do that. Okay, Dakota.
Hello. All right, so I'll just do all that lovely stuff. So the title is Murder in the Ninth Ward. It is a mystery, and the logline is a cynical detective and his new recruit are thrusted into a world of jazz, sex, drugs, and murder following the death of a jazz musician in New Orleans' lower Ninth Ward in 1947. Yeah, you're good. New Orleans, lower Ninth Ward, 1947.
All right, thanks for that. So, let's take a look. A cynical detective and his new recruit are thrust into a world of jazz, sex, drugs, and murder following the death of a jazz musician in New Orleans' lower Ninth Ward, 1947. So I do get the basics, but the hook is not really clear to me. To me, this sort of feels like this is a detective story set in New Orleans. Whereas I think that you could do a little more to sell what is unique and cool and special about the story. You have to imagine, especially with murder mystery, the audience has read a lot of these. So many of these. They know all the rules. They know all the tricks. They're very sort of... This is like some people read is murder mysteries. So to that end, I would clarify what makes this special. You have a cynical detective. We know. Detectives are usually cynical, right?
Right.
What is special? Is he a cynical detective he has synesthesia and he can see sound? Or is he, I don't know, is he part fairy? Or is he part, like, I don't know, like, it doesn't have to be a fantasy twist, but, like, what is different? It's okay if you don't know.
At the moment, I don't know yet.
So maybe also the uniqueness comes from the partnership, his new recruit. But who is his new recruit, right? So you might think of, is there some clash of personalities here that you can sort of highlight and showcase? Like maybe, I don't know, your main character is a racist and he has to partner up with the first ever black recruit in their department. I'm just picking something that would cause conflict, right? You don't have to use that, but something that would obviously feel like, oh yeah, sparks are going to fly in that particular relationship, right? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I was like, you just said In the Heat of the Night. That is the plot of In the Heat of the Night.
Oh, okay. Great. So that the sort of buddy cop sort of thing. The hook is usually the contrast between those two people. Think of did you watch True Detective?
Yeah.
So True Detective, huge contrast between the two guys. We have like a troubled but very down to earth family man partnering up with a cerebral freak. I don't even know how do we describe Rust. He's like like an existential cerebral madman almost who like we're lucky he works for the cops because if he didn't he would be like a serial killer.
Right.
So yeah, that combination of it's and yeah, that's just some version of one's by the books and one's out of the box. We've seen that a million times too, but True Detective made it feel so new and so different. And like that's the cool thing about this genre is that you can always find new life in stuff that we've seen a million times before. True Detective is a very tropey story, but people loved it and it felt so fresh and unique and like the characters felt so full of life. So it's not to say that you have to introduce some out of left field crazy thing, but more that you should amplify and bring forward what makes your characters different, or maybe it's the circumstances of the murder that's different, or maybe the antagonist that kind of is interesting. I don't know. Is it a serial killer who turns out is an 8-year-old girl or something? I don't know. Like, just give us something a little more. For this feels almost like a description of the genre. This feels like murder mystery, but set in New Orleans, 1947. That's like the setting and the general space that we're in. But beyond that, I think you need to give us a little more concrete detail and amplify the hook and bring it out more.
Okay. No, that's super helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No, I guess the only thing is like, so I'm really looking at James Ellroy, so like LA Confidential, Black Dahlia, stuff like that.
Yep.
Are there any other like kinds of things to kind of look at that I can just kind of really sink, my teeth into to just kind of read more? Because I'm always trying to read more. So if there's any suggestions or anything to read, that would be super helpful.
Sure. You mean for like mystery noir type stuff?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. You've already hit on the classics. You have James Ellroy. Raymond Chandler is the other, like, that's the mystery noir guy. I'm sure you've already probably read some Chandler before. And then beyond that, maybe we can ask the chat if you guys have favorites that sort of fit into that kind of classic noir detective space. Off the top of my head, nothing is jumping immediately to mind because I'm not the biggest mystery reader. But let's crowdsource the chat and ask around, and we'll see what people come up with for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And yeah, maybe next time we'll have some more examples to draw from and stuff to look at there. Thanks, Dakota. If you have the logline written out, if you could paste it into the chat and tag me. If you've already shared it before now, I might have lost track of it, so just tag my name next to it. I see this one. Is yours The Whisperings?
Yeah, that's mine.
Okay, great. Let's look at The Whisperings. Why don't you read it out for us?
Let me get it. 21 years after a monster kills his mother, a drug-addicted 30-year-old named Marcus Bell must unravel the truth of his mother's death in order to prevent the monster from hurting more innocent lives.
Okay, and this is pretty clearly a horror, right? Horror genre story?
Eldritch Horror, yeah.
Got it, okay. 21 years after a monster kills his mother, a drug-addicted 30-year-old, so it happened when he was 10, named Marcus. We don't care about their names. And also just people won't really remember the names. Must unravel the truth of his mother's death in order to prevent the monster from hurting more innocent lives. So I would like to ask just a few questions about this one. So has the monster been killing people for 20 years? Or has it only started again now?
It's been killing.
It's been...
He just sort of forgot about it. The memories just resurfaced.
So that, to me, that feels a little less urgent. You say he must unravel it, or else what? It will continue killing people like it has been for 20 years? I would say then in this case, you might want to think of the inciting incident a little bit more, and frame that up front. So something like when he discovers the monster that killed his mother is still out there, maybe that could be what triggers him to connect to the story. Or maybe somebody contacts him and asks for his help because he's the only one that survived an encounter with it, or something like that, right? So help us understand what kicks the story off.
The inciting incident I have is he goes to his town hall's time capsule opening, and time capsule's been there since like 1800s, 1900s. He opens it, and there's a note directed to him, and it sort of sparks the memories of his past because it mentions they know how to kill the monster, and it's still killing. So I already thought of that. I just didn't write it in the log line.
Wait, so who left the time capsule?
The town sort of put it in there, but it's a ghost that left a note in there. A ghost of the monster.
The ghost of
one of the victims left it in there for him. So this monster's been killing for thousands upon thousands of years, yet no one knew about it until now.
How did we not know about the people that were dying? Does it kill them in such a way that it's not clear that they've been killed by a monster or something like that?
Cops are covering up this sort of corruption type crap, government shit.
Okay. So
Stranger Things type stuff.
Okay. But so even so try to, in your logline, try to make it clear what draws the main character into the story. If it's a warning that he gets, or somebody's asking for his help, or something like that, then you might have to explain it in just pretty simple terms. The time capsule, I'm not quite sure who left that or why, or like what the specific circumstances are. And because you haven't written the story, you may be still wondering about some things. You might need to just think about some stuff more. But try to, in just the first clause, say, when this thing happens, that this is what forces the main character to be drawn back into this. If it's him becoming aware of the monster still being out there, that would make sense. If it's him only now having the ability to do something about it, that would make sense. If it's the monster has only now reawakened or something like that, that would also be like 3 different ways you could do it.
Right, that makes sense.
Cool. Okay, so try to pick a specific inciting incident and change your first clause to help us understand. And if you can give us any more about the monster, just because horror is defined by, like, the hook is the threat a lot of the time. In pitching something like it's a little bit like something like It, right? We would say, oh, it's a shape-shifting clown monster, right? So just give us a little more. Just help us understand what the monster is in any way. Sound good? Any questions?
Not that.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Hope that's helpful. All right. Arthur, go ahead.
I just put in the log line.
Okay, great. Did you tag me in it?
I didn't tag you in it. I didn't have time, but I do have the
Is it this one here, the Halloween one?
The Halloween one, yeah.
Okay. Go for it. Read it out for us.
All right. When a bratty little girl becomes a full-blown teenager during trick-or-treating, her disgruntled brother must somehow protect her innocence and reverse the change.
Nice. Okay. Or else what?
Well, I didn't think of that. I think it's mostly to protect her innocence, because she's actually a little girl.
Well, so is there a chance she will be? Is there a chance she'll be stuck in this new body forever? That's usually how these stories go.
Yeah. There's a chance she might be stuck in the new body forever. Yes.
Okay, so if you can clarify the rules a little bit, like, is it by the end of Halloween night or by next Halloween or something like that?
I think by next Halloween.
Okay, so they have a
It'll
year.
be like a year.
A year. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So he has 1 year to find a way to reverse the change, or else she would be stuck that way forever. That would be a nice way of adding in that ticking clock and also that sense of stakes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. Any questions on this one?
Yeah. I'm worried because this is a very niche type of story, and I very rarely see these type of stories in the market. So where am I supposed to read this type of story?
I used to read this kind of thing all the time when I was a kid. It was one of my favorite series. It was called Help, I'm Trapped In. My favorite one was called Help, I'm Trapped in My Teacher's Body. I don't know why that one was my favorite, but it was about a kid that switched bodies with his teacher. He also switched bodies with a pro wrestler in a different book and a supermodel in another book. So, like, no, this is very common sort of subject matter for, like, chapter book in middle grade, at least.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, that was like a whole series. That that was only one of many that were kind of like that. Especially, look at things like chapter books, like Wayside School, Bailey's School, any of those. I guess I'm just reaching back to things from my own childhood but I used to read kind of fantastical chapter books like this pretty frequently.
Yeah. Okay.
So is this for a younger age demographic, do you think?
I don't know if it's for a younger age demographic. It's 6 to 16. Is that a young age demographic?
Well, 6 is pretty young, and 16 is also. I mean, yeah, I would say if you could almost even do this as a picture book or a chapter book if you wanted to, depending on how mature you want to get with the subject matter. I would say this sounds like middle grade or YA at the most.
Yeah, middle grade or YA at the most. Mm-hmm. Definitely YA or middle grade.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, hope that helps. If there's something you can tell us in the first clause as well, instead of she just becomes a teenager, tell us like what actually causes that. Even if it's a fantastical thing, like she falls into a well, or she has the wrong candy that turns out to be a witch's candy, or something like that. Maybe just tell us what actually triggers it, if you can.
That would be good.
But beyond that, it's looking pretty good. Once you add that sense of ticking clock and stakes, I think we'll have a really clear picture of the story.
All right. That's good.
Thanks for sharing.
Okay.
I see Michelle has a hand raised. Do you have a logline you want to get feedback on?
Yes, actually, I have a few, but can I do more than one?
Longer on it. It's up to you.
Okay, I will do 2, and then we'll spend a moderate amount of time on it. Okay, let me just put these. Well, I'm just going to read them to you. Okay, the first one is called Third Shooter. The log line is, after discovering evidence that her father might have been one of the assassins in the JFK assassination, a JFK historian must reunite with her estranged father before other assailants kill her.
Before other assailants kill her? Wait, why is she in trouble?
Okay, because she discovered evidence that her father might have been one of the JFK assassins, and she, other people find out that she knows this, and so that's.
Oh, the thought is that she might expose them, or she might expose her own father as well?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so the father comes back into her. She has to reunite with the dad, to make sure that this is true. And if it's not true, then okay, it's just weird writing by her dad. But if it is true, that and in the meantime, people were shooting, trying to kill her.
Well, if people are trying to kill her, I think we can pretty safely say that she's right, and that she's onto something, right? So I think you don't need to say she finds evidence that he might have maybe been involved. That makes it sound a little indefinite. If you say she definitively finds out her father was one of the assassins, and now there's people after her. I get you a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So she discovers evidence that her father was one of the JFK assassins, and she must reunite with him to prove it, because it's just his journals, um, and things like that. But she makes the mistake of telling someone, and and then the killers are after her, while she's trying to reunite her dad, and then get the evidence, like, to the press, or the media.
Is this set in modern day?
Yeah, it's modern day. So, well, it is set in modern day and partially historical. I mean, you're going to go back partially to the assassination and see that her father was actually one of the assassins. But while the reader knows, it's the John Q public doesn't know it, and
you might
that's why.
Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'll see if we can get to the other one.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just say one thing, then we'll do the other one in just a quick time frame. I saw Charlie listed one as well, so I'll stay just a few minutes over just to make sure we get everything that's in the chat. I won't be able to get more than just what's in the chat now, so don't add any more at the moment.
Okay.
So I would consider setting this in the years after the assassination rather than modern day. Simply because that feels like such old hat. Like, Who Killed JFK feels like old news to us now. That it's a strange belief a little bit that now assassins are trying to kill you because you like. There's already so many conspiracy theories around JFK's assassination that it would almost be better for the assassins to not try to kill her, because by trying to kill her, that makes them look so much guiltier. And like, even if somebody came out and was like, I have evidence aliens killed JFK, then we're so used to hearing that kind of thing now, that kind of silly conspiracy nowadays, that it's just lost a lot of its impact and urgency. So my thought is, if this happened sooner after the actual assassination, then more people would have more to lose, and it would feel more urgent and desperate that they actually cover that up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right. So maybe 1970.
Sure, that could work.
Okay. So it would be that so 1970, maybe she was like in high school then, and now she's a historian of that era, and and then when she finds this out, she has. I'm just thinking that the father needs to reunite with her. If not, if that doesn't work, then okay, then that could just be her trying to not be killed.
So I would think that it would either be she needs to reunite with him because she thinks he's innocent and she's trying to prove his innocence, or she's trying to reunite with him in order to take him down. But I think it would have to almost be one of those, wouldn't it? Like, if she thinks he's responsible for the killing, then joining forces with him would only put her in more danger unless he could somehow get her out of it.
Right. So it needs to be that, because I was thinking that, well, first that he comes to see her, and he basically is like, come with me if you want to leave, sort of thing. And so they're trying to kill her because her dad is basically one of them. Something is kind of like Men in Black sort of thing,
Right.
or that are after her, or not Majestic 12, but something like that.
Okay.
So, but yeah, maybe she's got to think he's innocent.
Okay, so she's trying to clear his name, sort of thing, and therefore save her life.
Yeah.
I think I get it. Cool. So yeah, my main feedback though would be try setting it a little bit back in time, and I think the urgency of the story would make more sense. Let's do the next line. Go ahead.
Well, that would work because I lived in the 70s. So okay.
Cool.
Okay, you want me to do my next one, or are you going to go on to someone else?
Let's do your last one.
Okay. All right. Let me just. Okay. In the year 2026, the Republican-controlled government has repealed the 22nd Amendment, giving any president the option for unlimited terms. Now in 2032, Trump is in his third term, and a violent civil war has broken out. It's actually not supposed to be, like the movie Civil War. This is motivated between Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters. That's where the Civil War breaks out.
Okay, wait. That was the logline. Who was the main character?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a main character.
Okay, so logline should go like when inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes if you can. This sort of feels more like the world for a story. Yeah, there was just a very, very big movie that just came out with this very similar premise. But for instance, that movie is about war journalists who are covering the conflict, and they have a very clear goal. We're trying to get from point A to point C, right? So that actually frames the story quite nicely and gives us like an entry point. So it's a very complex space to be in. I'd recommend you don't write this book, first of all. But if you must, then pick a main character and a clear goal for them to have within that conflict.
Okay. You suggest I don't write it for what reason?
For the reason that it is a really sensitive, hot button topic in an election year right now. Not many people are going to be in the mood to read something like this, and that might be why you're interested in it. Like that could be like at the heart of why you want to do it. But you're talking about probably the most sensitive topic right now. There's a million ways to do it wrong, and even if you did it just right, a lot of people would hate it or misunderstand it or not get it or think you were doing it for the wrong reasons or any of those other things. It's just like such a complicated, emotional, messy topic right now. I would think that if you're just learning how to write books or just teaching yourself how to write books or you haven't written a couple yet, for a boot camp especially, write something with less baggage attached to it.
Gotcha.
It's not to say that no one can tell a good story like that. Like, I think the Civil War movie was actually quite well done. But even though it was really well done, you see a lot of people still completely misunderstanding it and hating it, and like controversy that is just going to be there that you may just not want to deal with.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. Okay, I saw one more logline from Charlie. Okay, Alteratus. Is that a real word? Alteratus.
It is a real word.
It is a real word. Okay. I'm going to look it up. Did I spell it right?
Yes, you did. I didn't. Or maybe it is spelled correctly on there. It looks a little different from on your screen. But it is a derivative of Alterity because this is like a side story to the script Alterity. Okay. So. To Alteratus is like it's a deviation, like to change something, an alternative, and which is a play on like the alternative historical background narrative that history has changed in this story.
Okay. Why don't you read the logline up for us?
Okay. After spending one last summer abroad, an apathetic English aristocrat disappears, prompting a desperate search by her family to uncover her whereabouts, unraveling her secrets.
Nice. So this tells us the situation, but it doesn't tell us whom we're actually following. Who's the main character?
The apathetic English aristocrat.
How could the main character be gone for most of the story as we follow people searching for her?
We follow her, and then we'll move to like once she's missing, the people. So the original story is everyone around her searching for her, and the short story I want to write is from her perspective. So we're with the missing girl.
We even see the desperate search unfolding?
Yes, we do.
How can we see it happening if we are the missing person? If we're with the missing person?
So we're going to start with her, and then there's a point when she gets on the train, which is when she goes missing in the original story, and that's when we leave her perspective, and we go to, like, into the original story from the other perspective. I guess that is the closest way I can explain it. Yeah, we start off with her in France. It's, like, the last summer, and she's in her own world, and we see like what's going on with her, like where she's at mentally, and then when she gets on the train to head back to England, that's when she goes missing, and it's like the catalyst that starts the original story. I want to write this almost like as a tie-in to the original story, which is in a script form right now.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with the original, but so what is the protagonist trying to do in this book?
In this, in the original story, the protagonist is looking for her.
No, in this story. What is the main character trying to do in this story?
She wants to stay lost. She doesn't want to go back home.
Wants to stay lost. Okay, so it's trying to avoid people looking for her?
Yeah, she's trying to avoid being found.
Okay, that's how you should frame the goal for the main character then. Not prompting a desperate search.
Okay.
But you should say, she must then avoid the people looking for her, though you might want to kind of clarify why she actually has deliberately left society or whatever in that case, right? Instead of just saying after spending a summer abroad, which doesn't really tell us much. You would probably say something like, after this leads her to wanting to go off the grid, or after she disgraces herself, or after a heartbreak, or whatever it is that causes that. So just help us understand her motivation. And then what we're actually watching her do is trying to avoid being found.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, I can make sense of that as a more active character goal. Any questions on this one?
Oh, no.
Cool. All right, thanks for sharing. And this was a short story, you said, right?
Yes, it will be a short story.
Okay, very cool. All right, thanks everybody. That's all we do have time for in today's class. We are going to continue this every weekend, every Saturday from 12 to 2 on WordCamp until the book is done. So that's basically the next couple months. And let's look at what we're doing next week. So we'll obviously give more feedback on loglines if you refined your logline a little further. But at this point, you're basically trying to decide the basics in terms of word count, genre, point of view. Where's my slide that says what is coming up? And next week we will give updated feedback on loglines and also get a little bit more into things like story archetypes and structure, characters, figuring out who all the main characters are going to be and the ways that their character arcs are going to interact with each other. So that's the ways that they will change throughout the story. Here's a list of everything coming up. We have lab later today. Oops, this is way too big. We have lab from 4 to 6 here on Script Camp. Or sorry, over on Script Camp. We also have things like Advanced Fiction Lab. If you apply to that and have written a couple of books in the past, you can apply and get into Advanced Fiction. It's Thursdays 12 to 2. We have Sunday TV Writers Lab, or sorry, TV Bootcamp starting tomorrow 10 to noon. That's going to be for writing a full pilot in 6 weeks. And video editing tomorrow 5 p.m. on Film Camp. Thanks so much, guys. We hope to see you soon at your next skill camp, word camp, script camp, any class or event of your choice.